What about the Good Friday Agreement that you mentioned before? Is that, you would say it might be a failure for the struggle, or is a consequence of that?
The Good Friday Agreement could only have come about because of the conflict. I'm quite convinced of that. There were attempts in the early 1970s and 1980s at political agreements, but the representative body for the majority of the nationalist Republican people weren't party to them, Sinn Féin. So I think, I'm reasonably sure the conflict, the militant end of the conflict, it basically had to happen. One, it's awful people's lives were taken. I really mean that, right? Doesn't matter what lives we're talking about, awful. It's awful the suffering, it's awful the imprisonment. I suffered from it, my family, my wife, my children suffered from it. But I'm still quite convinced it had to happen. No, it didn't have to happen. What we really needed was the British government to say, well, it's okay, we're now going to withdraw from governance here, and we're going to sincerely hope that the people here in the north of Ireland can get their reunification sorted out. But they didn't. They didn't do that. So what we had to do then was force them into that situation that they couldn't, the old era of the colonising power ruling. The British government then came to an agreement. It tried to exclude Irish Republicans, but we've got over that. We're the biggest political party in Ireland now, despite we were kept out of lots of the talks and the run into the Good Friday Agreement. We basically supported the Good Friday Agreement, and then when looking back on it, the Good Friday Agreement was the absolute turning point, setting up the political structures, which we now dominate. So people could say, yeah, but sure, if you're going to get it, you're going to get it. No, you weren't going to get the change. The British government were not going to give. It had to be taken.
Do you think it might be because the British government thought that by withdrawing from the north of Ireland, they might be, let's say, exposing those from their communities, like Protestants in this case?
I don't like using the religious terms. This is nothing, our conflict had nothing to do. Religion was a way down the line in what the important issues were here. It's politics we're talking about here, although I understand what you're saying. But you had to bear in mind Scotland, the big island, Britain, with Scotland, the majority of the population is in England, and with Wales. At one stage there was a major push towards Scottish independence, although it was purely electoral push. On the island of Ireland, in the north of Ireland, we had the push which was militant for removal. I don't know, I really don't know what the mentality is of the colonising power. But if the British had voluntarily withdrawn from the northern part of the island of Ireland, well, maybe that would have been an indicator to the Scottish. Well, we're next. Because at one stage, if you remember, the North Sea oil and the Scottish, there was a Scotland, to me, back in the early 70s, it looked like Scottish independence was on the cards, but the British government weren't prepared to give that. Obviously economics. But if the withdrawal from Ireland, or the north of Ireland, had happened, then it might have looked like it was inevitable for Scotland to get it, which could have created major problems for Westminster. I don't know, but it's a possibility that was in their thinking.
Okay.
If they give for the north of Ireland, they'd have to give for Scotland. There was no real push about the Welsh for independence. There was a little bit of push, but not much.
There was a bit of a nationalism.
There was a bit of the Welsh, but it was very low key.
Yeah.
Very low key. But the Scottish, because of the oil, at one stage looked like it was a goer, but it didn't happen.
And what do you think about that? I mean, Brexit, the north of Ireland voted to remain within the EU.
We did, yeah. And Scotland had also voted to remain within the EU.
But they were kept within the UK. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, Scottish nationalism is supposed to be way up there, but I mean, there's a couple of, I don't know what the Scottish nationalists can possibly do nowadays, because the North Sea oil is no longer the major factor of what it was in the 70s. And then you also have the Scottish Nationalist Party, which is a wee bit sort of been ripped apart due to the other non-political issues, more personal issues. So I really don't know. To me, the British government are still holding out on the agreement which they made in 1998 to have a referendum. I mean, no one is trying to force militarily the British government to have the referendum. But in 1988, what's 20, nearly 30 years ago, and they still haven't held it. They have an international signed agreement overseen by the United States to hold a referendum. But in the spirit of the goodwill which existed in 1898, there was no date put on for a referendum. It's just, it's going to be held. But the power to call the referendum lies with the British government, not the Irish government.
No?
It's solely with the British Secretary of State here. It's not a joint decision between the Irish and the British. It's not overseen by the American government. It's solely in the hands of the British government to call a referendum. However, that's over 30 years, 1988, 08, 18, 25 or so years ago, it has taken. But somebody within the British government, maybe 12 years ago, said, I think we'll have a referendum to leave Europe. And it has been held, and they've withdrawn from Europe. So they can make decisions on holding referendums when they want. The referendum was held to whether or not to remain within the EU, and the majority of people in England, because England has 50 million people or 40 odd million people, so whatever way the vote went in England would have meant that the rest of the United Kingdom would have to go. The north of Ireland voted to remain, Scotland remained, but England with the massive population, therefore we're now out of Europe. So the British government can move and hold a referendum when they want, when it's politically what they want, but they still haven't held the referendum which we want.
But can the Parliament here in Belfast say,
no.
We want to...
No.
There's no possibility?
No. The power to hold the referendum lies with the British government.
Okay.
Full stop.
Even though now it's a majority in the Parliament for Sinn Féin?
Yeah. It's a Westminster decision, not local stormont, not local.
Okay, if you were to vote tomorrow, would you vote for a United Ireland?
Yeah, I would vote for a United Ireland. But the fact that Sinn Féin is the biggest political party on the island of Ireland doesn't necessarily mean that a referendum would go the way of Sinn Féin. Because people will maybe vote for Sinn Féin because they like the representative, or they like policy X or policy Y.
Okay.
But people mightn't feel comfortable voting for a reunified Ireland. And that is another thing what I want to bring into the equation here. There's no discussion on what a united Ireland will be. I know what I want within the united Ireland, but there's no, the only people who are holding public discussions on on a referendum are Irish Republicans. There's no attempt by the Irish government in the south or the British government for here in the north for them to host meetings and have academics or professionals explaining what the new transport, what the new health, what the new social services, what anything's going to be. There's no attempt by those two, by the Irish government or the British government. None of them are attempting for people to know, because you can't vote for a concept. You shouldn't be voting for. I like United Ireland. What type of United Ireland? What sort of health service? What sort of housing? What sort of transport system? That's what needs discussed.
Yeah.
And neither of the governments are hosting them. The only people who are hosting those meetings are Irish Republicans.
Do you think it's because no one wants to really look at the issue? They just want to be like, there's something going on in the north of Ireland.
They want,
in the north, but we don't really want to look into that.
Yeah,
because it's too complicated, right?
Well, it's not. It could be that. I don't really know. Maybe it's this residue of colonialism or maybe it's this residue of, in the south of Ireland, there's two political parties and they have been government for over 100 years. They don't want to upset in the apple cart with a new reunified political situation. There are vested interests in the current situation on the island of Ireland, despite the agreement that the referendum, what are they afraid of? See, the power to hold it lies with the British, but very discreetly, or maybe not discreetly, very upfront. The Irish government are also very supportive. Well, they're supportive in that they're not complaining about the British not holding it. So it's a major issue, and a problem is one problem is that, I mean, I'm not I don't know what sort of transport system would be best in a reunified Ireland. I have an idea of what sort of education system I'd like to see. I'd like to see, there's a medical, the health system I would like to see, social services, pensions. It's all of those things where, I mean, Germany went through it, and it must be complicated. But I mean, there are obviously people in society who know all about those things. We need to hear from them, because people have to know when the referendum is held, they have to know what they're voting for. Boris Johnson, the British Prime Minister, some time ago, showed us how not to hold a referendum. He lied to the media and said it's all going to be good, but there were no communal meetings for people to ask people, what does it mean? What's going to happen? Yeah. If we vote to leave the EU, what's going to happen for goods, services, transport? But people are finding out after the vote. People should find out before the vote in order to vote if that's what you want.
Si te ha gustado la entrevista, dale a like y suscríbete para más contenido. No olvides dejar un comentario con tus propuestas para futuras entrevistas.